That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
I want to start out with just a general observation I have about myself, and I ask you a question. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel unstoppable. I can't wait to get on to a certain task or get finished with a certain task. And then there's other days when I get up and I can hardly drag my sorry butt to work at all. I don't know if that resonates with you, but if it does, the difference between those days has something to do with a word called motivation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's not just about getting started, it's about staying in the game as well. So we're going to talk about motivation across a big spectrum of things that we started last week, a couple weeks ago with inspiration. And we're going to take those next couple of steps today. And it's not just about our professional success. It's about a lot of things that we do in life that we need to stick with. So we'll overview that in just a couple of seconds. But first, I want to start like we often do with our Blue Threat Proverb of the week. And this time it's Blue Threat Proverb number 13. And it says, "You are only as committed as you are convinced." You're only as committed as you are convinced. And that's pretty important to what we're going to talk about today, because we can't convince ourselves that what we're doing is worthwhile if we can't motivate ourselves through that bit of logic in our brain that says, you know, this is really something important. If we can't convince ourselves, we'll never be able to be committed. So that's where we're going today. And I guess we should probably start with a definition. I think we all sort of know what motivation is, but motivation is simply that force that initiates, guides, and sustains behaviors that are directed at some goal, right? And I want to begin with talking about motivation by reflecting back to when we talked about inspiration. So motivation happens across the spectrum. On the very first spark of interest, we may become inspired. Think of it as, I don't know, a first date with something, right? You look across the room, maybe a wink, a smile, talk to somebody, and you say, hey, man, I'm pretty inspired about this. We should get together. Okay? Now, as you move past the first, I would say, couple of dates, you start to think, is this sustainable, right? Should I ask her or him out on a third date, right? Is this something I'm really interested in? Or is that inspiration, that magic spark, wearing off already? So let's assume that it does go well. And we move past not only being inspired and excited about something, but as we get to know more about it, we become motivated. Okay? And then let's fast forward 5 or 6 months down the road in this metaphorical relationship. We need to then have the resolve to continue it, right? To sustain it. Right? After the emotions of inspiration and motivation have worn off. Right? How do we develop that type of motivation, that resolve that pushes through tough times and challenges when that initial blush of excitement is worn off? And if we get past that, we get to that magic word a lot of guys don't like to talk about, right? Commitment, right? So inspiration, motivation, resolve, and finally commitment. That's how we change. It's how we change our lives. It's how we change our futures. Right? And so when we're talking about motivation, we're almost, by definition, talking about change, because we're motivated to break from our status quo, whatever that is, and achieve something that we desire, right? So I want to bring in a couple of books that that are dog-eared and highlighted, and I've read a ton of times. I could find one, I couldn't find the other. The first one is a book called Switch by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. They're brothers. And the subtitle is How to Change Things When Change is Hard. Right? And the reason this book is so cool is because they talk a lot about motivation. Sorry, I'm going to turn my phone off here because I just heard it bing and I didn't run my pre-podcast checklist. All right, we're silent. Sorry about that. So Chip and Dan Heath want to talk about change. Right? And in order to talk about change, they use a really cool metaphor. They use a metaphor that has three elements: an elephant, a rider, and the path they want to navigate. Right? So the rider symbolizes our logical side, right? Our analytical side, our reason, our ability to plan things. This is a part of us that makes decisions based on facts, right? It's a part of us that really makes us human. Right? So we can steer and direct. But as we're going through this jungle of life, we need something powerful to move us, right? And that's the elephant. The elephant represents our emotional, or maybe instinctual, I don't know, our instinct, our desires, right? Our impulses, our feelings, fear, love, hate, anger, all those things are elephant type emotions. So we got this powerful thing, and we've talked a lot about the interrelationship between logic and emotions before. And I've told you that emotions are generally temporary. If we can recognize them as the rider and direct them, we can get this elephant moving where we want it. And that's part of the essence of understanding motivation. Right? We know that motivation is emotionally driven, but it has to be intellectually controlled, right? And here's the other thing. The rider can ride for a short period of time on that elephant, right? But the elephant is so much stronger. If the elephant decides, hey, there's something over here I would rather chase, or I'm tired, I don't want to move anymore, there's no amount of logical reasoning that'll make it budge or change its path. Which brings us to the third point, this path through the jungle. The rider directs the elephant, our intellect directs our emotions, but we have to be smart enough and use our brains enough to be able to create a path that doesn't have a lot of obstacles, not a lot of mountains, rivers to cross, big logs to jump over, all of those things. So the rider tries to determine the path, and emotion drives us forward. So that's important to understand when we're talking about motivation for a couple of different reasons, right? We have to be able to motivate the elephant, right? We need to be able to address our emotional side. And in order to do that, we need to find a way to recognize that spark of inspiration and fan that flame to keep us moving forward. And then we need to use that progress to create a different emotion, one of satisfaction, one of achievement, and be able to fan that flame and keep it moving. So motivation is a lot more complex than people think. And that's why sometimes I get out of bed ready to charge into work and slay the world. And other times I get out of bed and say, I don't want to go to work at all. I'm tired. I don't want to do anything. I'd rather just sit and binge watch some TV. Once we understand what that looks like and how we can modify the path and motivate the elephant, we're really onto something. And that's where the second book that I want to talk about comes in. I couldn't find a copy of it, but I found a copy of his other book, which is also pretty cool. The author is named Stephen Pressfield, and this book's called The Warrior Ethos. That's not the book I want to talk about. He's got another book called The War of Art. right? It's a little takeoff on Sun Tzu's Art of War. And he also uses a anthropomorphic, that's the word, right? Where you make something that's not alive appear to be alive thing, just like Chip and Dan Heath do with the rider and the elephant. He talks about this malevolent force out there he calls the resistance, right? Resistance is the antithesis of motivation. So in order to overcome that resistance, it's wise of us as riders of the elephant to understand what that looks like and how to get around it. So a lot of kind of weird stuff to get us going here today, but I think it's important that we maybe wrap this into a simple example. Let's say you've been pretty sedentary for a while, just went through this for about a year and a half. After I got my hip replacement done, I just never wanted to exercise again, and so I didn't. And after a while, it became just too hard to get started again. But I knew I needed to do it, and I really wanted to get that feeling of being in shape again. That was the rider. That was my logical mind, knowing that it's good for my health, especially as I age. And so I have a plan. And that's where the elephant came in. He just didn't want to budge. It just seemed like it was going to be hard and too much effort. And there were so many other things to do. And that was that sort of malevolent force that Pressfield calls the resistance. So there are a few mental tricks that we can do to overcome that resistance. One of them is you fan the flame of motivation by keeping the next victory really small, very near, very achievable, right? So you motivate the elephant by making exercise enjoyable, right? My wife and I found this 30-minute workout series online that we can do together. And that's the last thing, I mean, we hadn't ever done something like that together before. But you know what? It was quick, it was fast. Be honest with you, by the way, it's called the Iron Series with a lady named Carolyn Gervan or something like that. And I thought this little sissy girl thing for 30 minutes wouldn't do much good. After the first one of those events, I could barely walk the next morning. So I knew I was onto something. Well, I've been through the whole series of 30 workouts now. I'm starting it again, and then I'll move on to something else. So I found a way to make that small victory enjoyable and then fan the flame. It became something that was manageable and actually just a little bit fun. Right? Now, there's a second part about this that will keep you going. Remember, inspiration, motivation, resolve, and then commitment. So now we're moving from that motivation into the resolve thing. And one of the key elements there is accountability, right? What we're trying to do is create a new habit. And we've talked about behavioral strength before and how habits are everything to us, especially in this distracted world. We want to start something and then have it become a habit so it's no longer difficult to do it. It's natural to do it. So the term is accountability, right? I have a workout buddy. And because I have a workout buddy, when I say, hey, I'm just too busy, I get that side eye, like, really? Are you too busy? Are you too lazy? Doesn't even have to say it because I know. And I say, okay, I'm coming. I'm going to throw down whatever I have. We'll get our 30-minute workout in. So this metaphor, I think, helps us explain not only why change is hard, but how we can manage it, right? We use the emotion, we use the elephant of the emotion, and we do that in a couple of different ways. We get the elephant moving, we try to get the resistance out of the way, right? And then we use our logic to clear and take the shortest path while keeping that elephant motivated. So the next section I want to talk about a little bit is there's really two types or two sources of motivation. The first one is called intrinsic, right? Internal rewards, personal satisfaction, growth, dopamine hits. I feel good after a workout, right? And the second is extrinsic or external. And that's typically driven by some sort of reward that you get, a promotion, maybe more money, maybe recognition or approval. And if you hear most people talk about motivation, they're always going to tell you intrinsic motivation is better. I'm not sure I buy that. I think like everything else in the world, it depends. Right? What's it depend on? I think it depends on the task at hand, right? Is this something you potentially enjoy, or is it something that you just have to get done and it's not enjoyable, right? If it's something you have to get done and it's not enjoyable, a good external, extrinsic kick in the butt is sometimes very, very helpful, right? If the task doesn't align with your personal beliefs or your personal interests, then you really need external motivation to get it. Things like money, promotion, a pat on the back from somebody, whatever it is. Usually it's some combination of the two that will keep you going. But it's important to understand the difference and how it sounds, right? Because we're capable in just how we word what the challenge is to ourselves of moving from extrinsic or external motivation to intrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation is, I know there's a job opening coming up, and I really want to get promoted into that job, right? So that's external. I want to be promoted. More money, more prestige, better control of my schedule, whatever. All you have to do is rephrase that a little bit and say, I want to be the kind of person that's promotable. Right? Whole different look, right? I want to be promotable. What's that look like? Well, I want to be diligent and hardworking. I want to go the extra mile. I want to be collaborative and a good team player. I want to show some leadership skills. And you know what? Even if I don't get promoted this time around, I'm going to be in really good place for a lot of opportunities that present themselves. So a really subtle shift from, I want to get promoted, and so therefore I'm going to do these things. And if it doesn't come true, then what happens? Oh, it was all wasted, right? Versus that simple change of mindset that says, I want to be promotable. And that changes everything, because even if you don't get it, you've still got the skill sets. Now, both things, you ended up in the same place. You were more vigilant, or you were collaborative, you were showing leadership. You did all those same things. But in one case, at the end of it, you're frustrated and cynical and unlikely to be, maybe even to try again for something. In the other case, you can't wait for the next opportunity to present itself. So really kind of a neat little Jedi mind trick there. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about that Chip and Dan Heath point out real clearly, and also I think Pressfield does as well, what looks like resistance, what looks like obstacles in the path is often just a lack of clarity. And that's almost a direct quote out of the book. So what does that mean? A lot of times when we're under pressure, under stress, we allow a lot of the distractions they act like weeds in our path. We can't really see where we want to go because all of these things are coming in. Professional athletes, college athletes, athletes at all levels actually, that practice good, what's called psychological hygiene, they think a little bit differently. It's like we just talked about the same skill set. Instead of, if I make this putt, I'm going to win the U.S. Open, or if I can jump this height, I win an Olympic gold medal. It's something different. I'm having an opportunity to compete at the highest level, and no matter what happens, I am banking this experience and learning from it. And so suddenly all of those distractions about what happens if I do or if I don't fade away. I'm just in the moment, right? I'm banking this experience. I'm reveling in this experience. I want to remember what it feels like. Not all of those outside things coming at us from the side of the path. So that's enough on kind of the explanation and tips on that thing. I want to get into a little bit about how we develop motivation, because I think that's important. I think we feed off the fuel of inspiration, first of all. Right? And then we have to find some goal, some waypoint near enough to achieve on that. Back to our dating scenario, I wanted to go out with me on a second date, right? I want to be the kind of person that is dateable, right? So two ways of looking at it again. There's a lot of stuff about goal setting that's out there, and I'm not going to get into it because I think it's been overdone. For me, it just has to be somewhere in front of me that I can reach, and somewhere that I have enough mental horsepower to be able to navigate the path to it, right? There's all kinds of frameworks. You've probably heard of the SMART goal framework, which is what? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, I think. I can't remember the T. Time bound is the T. Good stuff. For me, something achievable that's right in front of me in the near term that will spark further motivation when I get there. It's a small waypoint on a larger journey. Right? So what do we do with that? Why is that so important? It's important because what we're looking for is small wins. Why? Because we have to keep feeding the emotional side. We got to keep the elephant motivated to keep moving. So small successes sustain motivation, right? I think the Heath brothers refer to them as bright spots that keep us moving forward. Anytime you've got a big project, I think back to maybe writing a book or completing my doctorate, it looks just too difficult to get there. I mean, a book, 80,000 to 100,000 words, that's huge, right? It's months and months of work, maybe years of work. But if I can get 1,000 words a day in 100 days, 3.5 months, wow. So what I've done is I've said, okay, I'm gonna get to work and I'm going to write roughly 1,000 words a day. And some days I'll look down and I'll have done 8,000, right? Some days I'll look down and I will have done 700. But I almost never, when I'm on a project, look down and see I've done 0, right? It might be 700 of the crappiest words you've ever seen, but I'm moving forward. I'm getting that emotional feedback that says, hey, I'm staying the path, right? So breaking it up into smaller, achievable steps. And then the other thing is there has to be some intrinsic motivation to continue long term, right? You can get a crappy job assigned to you and power through it with external motivation. But even if it's a crappy job, the way I like to view it myself, and maybe this will work for you, maybe it won't, is to say, hey, somebody thought I was part of a solution here. That makes me feel good. This is not stuff I enjoy, but I do enjoy being thought of highly enough to be put on this task by someone who sees me as part of the solution. And when I see myself as part of a solution, I will act on things even when they're not enjoyable, right? My goals are created on a different identity. Not that I want to accomplish this task, but I want to be the kind of person that continues to be considered for difficult roles. Right? Another way to kind of flip what's going on, to fight the three-headed dragon of apathy, frustration, and cynicism. That was a flashback to last week's stuff about my new book, Armored Knight, The Relentless Pursuit of Resolve, Resilience, and Recovery to Life's Challenges, Amazon.com. Please don't forget. So the last thing I want to get at today over the next couple of minutes is how do we sustain things? How do we sustain it over a longer period of time? Excuse me. And that's where we get past The rider, our logical side, the elephant, the brute force of our emotion. And we talk a little bit more about shaping the path, making changes to our environment to encourage us to continue to progress. Right? I think one of the quotes out of the book, and it harkens to some of my aviation CRM challenges, is often what looks like a people problem is a situation problem, right? So what you want to do is focus on the problem, not the person. And even when I'm forced to work with people that I would not normally work with on something that may be even frustrating to me, it can be really powerful to look at it that way. So you want to create an environment that sort of supports your goals, right? That will allow you to stay emotionally engaged. I think there's a couple of tips that are in the books that are worth mentioning. Being part of a group, having a mentor that you can go to, having a protege that you can help shape, builds that accountability into what you're doing. So even on a bad day, you might learn something or you might teach something, and that is feeding the elephant. That's feeding that. I feel good about that, right? I didn't succeed in getting this particular task done, but you know what? I took somebody aside and I taught them something I know, or I offered my problems up to somebody that I trust, and they gave me some really good ideas about what to do next time. I came out of the day being a smarter person than I went into it. So external accountability in all forms, be that mentors, group, working with a group, having a protege, that will all boost your internal drive. So last thing I want to talk about here today, I think, is dealing with setbacks, right? We know, we've talked about this 100 times, that resolve is the ability to see the setbacks in advance, not specifically what they are, but that they're coming, right? Resolve means we know we're going to get hit in the head with a 2x4 and we're going to eventually get up and keep moving forward anyway. The way we frame these challenges is huge, right? You want to do a couple of things. One, we've kind of talked about already, shrink the challenge, right? When that challenge comes, take little minor steps that are small enough to keep moving forward. I think we need to understand that big problems and big challenges are rarely, if ever, solved with big solutions, right? They're almost always solved with step-by-step small solutions. And knowing that, it allows us to take that first step and that second step, even against what might appear to be an insurmountable challenge in our life. Right? When we do all these things, it becomes routine. It becomes a habit. And once we have a habit of breaking big things into small things and having accountability people and reframing things, we can build a success mindset that will keep us going through the toughest of times. And the last piece of that is understanding why you're doing it in the first place. You got to continually reconnect with that initial inspiration, your reason for beginning something, and the reason that you made the next steps to plan some change, to stay reignited with your motivation. Short-term actions, right? Long-term identity, long-term purpose, all things that we've talked about in past segments. So just kind of recap here. Remember the metaphor of the elephant, which is your emotions. Really important we learn how to manage those as best we can as a rider, and understanding that there's resistance out there in the world to just about anything we want to achieve, and that resistance may at sometimes appear to be alive and malevolent, but it doesn't matter because we go from that inspiration through motivation and into resolve. And when we get to that portion of resolve, we've got some other tools. We break big challenges into little challenges. We begin to have identity-based goals, right? that instead of project-based goals, I'm a problem solver, not I'm solving this problem, right? And so I want to kind of wrap it up with two things here. One that's absolutely related to what we're talking about, and another one on a note that came from a viewer, and then we'll call this a wrap today. So Chip and Dan, he said, change is hard because people wear themselves out, right? And that's the second surprise about motivation and change. What eventually will look like laziness is often exhaustion, right? Those days when I get up and I say, I really don't want to go do anything today, and I don't have those often, but I have them sometimes. Instead of saying you're lazy, I've got to look back a little bit and say, why am I so damn tired? Why am I exhausted on this project or this task or whatever it is? So that kind of wraps up our stage one of motivation. We're going to get into the stage two part about what it means to really commit to something. And by commitment, we're now not talking about 6 months or a year. We're talking about a lifelong commitment to some purpose, cause, project, whatever it is. We're going to talk about that a little bit more next time. But I want to finish up with an email I got from somebody who listens to my podcast. I don't know this person well. He was a LinkedIn friend, but he said this to me. I wish I would have heard your podcast when I was younger and employed, and I could still make a difference. Okay. Now, that's just kind of sad. And this guy's probably listening, so thank you so much, Roger. But you know what? Here's the thing. There is no point in your life when we cannot make a difference, right? And I found this quote. It's from an author named Terry Pratchett, and a book called Reaper Man. And it says this: no one is dead until the ripples they cause in the world die away, until the clock they wound winds all the way down, until the wine she made has finished its ferment and the last drop has been drinking, until the crop they planted is harvested. The span of someone's life and someone's life influence is only the beginning of their actual existence. So I'd like to finish up by saying it doesn't matter where you're at in your life. It doesn't matter where you're at in your career. It's never too late to start making a difference. And so, like always, we'll finish up by saying, I hope we've given you something today that's helped you grow where you are with the resources that you have at hand, and maybe just motivated you to get a little bit better tomorrow than you are today. We will see you soon.